I would say that Rishi Sunak is as English as Tizer and Y-fronts, right? He is absolutely English. He was born and bred here. And I wouldn't say that the colour of his skin makes him any
He's
less.
a brown Hindu. How is he English?
Because he's born and bred here.
So by being born here, you become English, in your opinion?
Yeah.
English, because there's a difference, right?
Breaking right now, an extraordinary row has broken out on the Triggernometry podcast between the host Konstantin Kisin and Fraser Nelson, Times columnist, Spectator former editor, real member of the mainstream media establishment. And it's all over what it means to be English. Alex Phillips, former Brexit Party MEP and author of the That's What She Said Substack, is with me to analyse this. But first, prepare to be shocked. Here is the first part of Fraser Nelson versus Konstantin Kisin.
At what percentage of the native population does England cease to be England? Is it 50%? Is it 40%? Is it 10%? When there are no English people left, is it still England? Right? That is a thing that no one wants to talk about, but I know millions of people subtly feel, and not just English or British people, my relatives from Russia or Ukraine or Armenia or whatever, they come to Heathrow and they go, is this still England? Right? Now, you could say that shows the success of our society. There's a hell of a lot of people who don't agree with you.
That's right. I mean, do we regard Rishi Sunak as English, for example?
I've always said, this is a very unpopular thing, that I'm not English. I will never be English. I don't think Rishi Sunak is English. We're both British, but we're not English.
No, you're from, you weren't born here. You were an immigrant.
No, but my son was born here. I don't think my son is English.
Right.
He's born to a Russian
again,
Ukrainian
that's definition,
immigrant.
right? I would say that Rishi Sunak is as English as Tizer and Y-fronts, right? He is absolutely English. He was born and bred here. And I wouldn't say that the colour of his skin makes him any
He's
less.
a brown Hindu. How is he English?
Because he's born and bred here.
So by being born here, you become English, in your opinion?
Yeah.
English, because there's a difference, right?
I don't think English is national. Look, to take, I'm a Scotch, right?
Yeah.
Now, are my kids English? I would say they are.
How?
Because they were born here.
They're Scottish.
Nope.
By blood?
No,
right?
they've hardly ever been to Scotland, unfortunately.
So what?
By blood, so give me this. I mean,
my son is born to a Russian and a Ukrainian, right? How on earth is he English?
Because he was born here. I
mean, you think that being born in a country makes you that of that? So if your children had been born in Japan, would they be Japanese?
If they were born there, look, you get white Caribbean people, for example.
Hold on, just the Japanese example. Would they be Japanese?
If they were born there and lived their life there, then yeah.
But he didn't want to answer that, Alex, because of course, it's only when you insert a white English person into a different culture like Japan where people like that think, hold on, my argument falls apart. Fascinated to know your reaction.
Yeah, well, it is ridiculous. It's almost like saying, essentially, that if I happen to be born in, I don't know, Saudi Arabia because a parent of mine was over there working on a project, that all of a sudden I'm Arabic. Again, it is denying statehood and denying identity to anybody who is Caucasian or anybody who is native-born European, because in doing that, oh, I don't know, is that white supremacist? It's sort of suggesting that whiteness cannot be identified, Englishness cannot be identified, the erosion of the nation state. The thing is, this stuff has been drummed into Western European populations for so long that people actually fear they're fearful. They're actually afraid to turn around and say, I'm white, I'm British, and there's nothing wrong with that, that I think that that's perfectly okay. And what a horrible situation to be in when you have to have this sort of baked in, inbuilt, original sin shame of being born to a certain nation or within a certain skin color. But those people who have managed to get where they are in the world of legacy media or politics have had to kowtow to that set of beliefs. They've never really analysed or scrutinised them because it's felt far too dangerous to do so. And yet at the same time, if you had someone who was mixed race or somebody who was, multiple heritage saying, I'm black and I'm proud, or I'm whatever and I'm proud, and this is cultural appropriation if you happen to have this particular dress or if you celebrate this particular festival, we go to great lengths to actually worship, idolize, and fetishize every single other culture, and how anybody with even the most sort of, remote connection to it from identifying as it. But if you bring that back to Englishness or whiteness or Europeanness, then it is utterly taboo to flag that up and say that this is allowed and this is permissible. And again, this is the sort of narrative, the corrosive, carcinogenic toxin that has been woven now throughout our entire establishment, that is leading to the social divisions that are so perilous going forward. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being English. Now, other people can say, does that mean a skin color? In this day and age, when we have had generations of people who have come to settle here, and like I said, sing God Save the Queen in a turban and in our rugby team or whatever, then, fine. I think that we can open this up to anybody who is, proven themselves or is baked in and, inculcated within our system so heartily. If you're going to do that, then you've also got to say that the white farmers in South Africa, who are now, the Boers are generations in South Africa, that they are Africans and they also too deserve to be treated with respect. The problem is it's a two-tier system. White means that you don't get to have any sort of stakehold in your own heritage and your own cultural legacy, whereas every other culture gets to be hero worshipped, while we're not allowed to critique it or, attach ourselves to it at all. And again, it's this sort of constant corrosion that is now proving to be so divisive.
Indeed, as Vaughan Newton posted on our live YouTube chat, if a dog is born in a stable doesn't make them a horse. And interestingly, Alex, I have a really personal take on this because I am an Englishman who was born in New Zealand. And very often folk on the left try and say to me, you're not English. How can you be English? You were born in New Zealand. And it's like, of course I am. My mum was born in Essex. My dad was born on a British Army base in Malta. Very similar to your circumstances, I believe, Alex. And the point is, Englishness is just in me. It is in my blood. And yes, I am also a proud New Zealander. New Zealand is a nation of largely immigrants from the UK, but I've always been English. I've always felt English. And it is more than just the fact that I have carried an English passport since before birth. It's because it is in my blood. Now, what's interesting with Fraser Nelson is that when he is asked to define Britishness by the Triggernometry guys, he initially says that is impossible to define, which I think is another indictment on the elite class. Watch this. The reason you're watching this show is because you know that these days, and we've been discussing it lots at the moment, it's impossible to trust the mainstream media or the so-called fact checkers who claim to patrol social media. And that's for a very good reason, given the Brexit debate, COVID debacle, and demonization of Donald Trump. But I've got the solution for you. Today's sponsor, Ground News, created by a former NASA engineer to provide you with the only safe way to consume the headlines, is going to solve so many of these issues. Go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out for yourself, by the way. But I want to show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's take the recent story. We've discussed it lots of Outspoken of Elon Musk's fallout with Nigel Farage over Tommy Robinson, which the left-wing legacy media tried to whip up to destroy all three men, actually. And by looking at Ground News, you can see very clearly that it's collated the 230 sources on this story in one place. But what Ground News instantly shows is how the story is being covered by the media and broken down by whether those media organizations lean to the left or right, illustrated by its biased distribution service, which features on all stories. Then you can scroll down and actually see every article about the topic broken down by the political position or ownership of the publication. So in this case, it shows quite clearly that Fox News gave a fair analysis compared to Mediaite and The Independent, which did not, lambasting the men as morons with big egos without actually looking into why this split happened and how it can be resolved. What's more, Ground News gets to know you personally, providing you with the news stories you're interested in, while also analysing your own biases and coming up with potential blind spots you might not be hearing about because of your media consumption. And look, I know you love the news, that's why you're watching Outspoken, but you don't trust the legacy media. But what Ground News does is give you the tools to understand the truth about what is going on in the world. It is the only way I read the news now, allowing you to see through media bias and manipulative narratives with no more relying on the MSM to define what's really going on for you. So go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out. You can subscribe through my link today for 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use for unlimited access. And I should say, by the way, Ground News is a really great organization. It is subscriber funded, and by supporting my sponsors like Ground News, you also support my work too. And for less than a Netflix subscription, you can get all the world's news in one place and think for yourself. It really has been a game changer for a news junkie like me. So let me just repeat the address. It is linked in the show notes below, or you can click on the QR code if you're watching on screen. But the address, ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
What is the concept of Britishness?
The concept of Britishness?
Yeah.
Well, one of the funny things about it is that it's almost impossible to define. But, you know, because we don't have a national day really other than Remembrance Sunday.
Yeah.
We don't have a little list of mission statements or values.
Okay, if you used to be in charge of a pretty significant operation of The Spectator,
Yeah.
right? If I came to you and I said, what is the mission of The Spectator? And you went, well, the thing about The Spectator is it's really difficult to define. And, you know, we don't have a national, we don't have a this, we don't have a that. I'd think this guy doesn't know what he's doing.
I would look. Of course, and I could tell the Spectator's there to inform, entertain, delight, bring humor, whatever, right?
Right.
Now, but my point about Britain is that people can define it different ways. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. But I would regard it as the world's first and most successful multi-ethnic state through empire. Number one, right? Number two, it is we are the country that pretty much invented the notions of liberty and democracy and exported them to the Western world. I would say it's the home of democracy. Although when you look at how few young people actually are into democracy, you wonder if it's going to stay that much longer. But I would say that's a fundamental part of it. Rule of law, I think, is important. Tolerance. And also defending liberty, which we've done pretty much better than any other country in Europe. Now, hopefully, we will not have to do that again. But it is the kind of place, I think, where Britain as a country is the cradle of opportunity. It's a place which is recognized world over as being the place where, if it's done properly, then you can make whatever you want of your life.
But Alex, he was shamed into coming up with what it meant to be British, because did you notice to begin with, he said that's impossible to define. When put on the spot by Konstantin, he could immediately list off all of the values of The Spectator magazine. I find it so depressing.
Well, he actually listed off all the values of Britain and then said Britain doesn't have any sort of uniting values. It's kind of weird. He also said that, well, you know, we just have the odd Jubilee and that's it and nothing else. We're not allowed anything else. I mean, we're not allowed St. George's Day. We're not allowed to fly the cross of St. George. We're not allowed to have all these jingoistic symbols of nationality because they're waytheft. So it's been sort of drummed into Britons that we're not allowed to have a celebration of our own culture. And then he turns around and says, well, there isn't any. I mean, what absolute nonsense. There always has been. And actually what we need to see is a resurgence in some of those things. You know, the striking difference, he talked about as being one of the most successful multi-ethnic societies. He has a point here, right? Now, what's changed is back in the era of Imperial Britain, there was the sort of idea of the Queen under Victoria, this is, and then actually going up to our own Elizabeth before she died. We had a royal family which represented that. And when people came to this country, they knew what being British was. It was tea drinking. It was God Save the Queen. It was going to church on a Sunday. It was mowing the lawn. It was roast dinners. It was all of those things. And yet all of that stuff we've been told, no, that's not Britain anymore. Britain is a Vindaloo. Oh, no, that's not Britain anymore. Britain is actually celebrating Eid. So all the things that were British, we've been told we're not allowed to do and don't represent Britain because we've moved on from that now. And then he says, well, you know, Britain doesn't have a uniting thing. The difference is when you go to America, right? The American flag flies on most buildings.
Yep.
American schools always put their hand on their heart and sing the national anthem. You know, the tokens, the gestures of America and what America represents are still bolstered and promoted. And that actually has helped America really sort of sell itself to the world about what it is. Britain has done the opposite. Instead, we said, I'm sorry, all those things we were of the past, a country that at one point dominated 1/3 of the globe, that actually did export all the things he listed there: democracy, rule of law, so on and so forth, the English language, Christianity, cricket, you know, all of those things. We're being told it's shameful and we're sorry for doing them and we shouldn't have done them. And actually we're over them now. They don't matter anymore. So, you know, this is the big problem. And people in elite positions have been so brainwashed into the idea that Britain is synonymous with shame that now we're turning around grappling for a sense of national identity. And going back to what David Betts was saying when he said that, you know, Britain could be ripe for civil unrest, one of the points he made was that the glue, the unifying element that actually brings people together, regardless of sexuality, regardless of skin color, a sense of belonging to a thing, that has been so chipped away that it's left us so fragmented. He actually labels that as one of the critical pre-warning signs of becoming a broken society.
Goodness me. I just want to play you one more little bit from this interview, Alex, because I think to me it shows, I mean, look, Fraser Nelson, he's absolutely part of the elite class, part of the establishment through and through. And I think he's completely lost as to why ordinary folk like you and like me are so concerned about what's happened to the United Kingdom.
Now, perhaps if you've grown up in a country, you can't really see it, how others see it. But I think the British light has never shone brighter than it does right now. And that, of course, every successful democracy is self-critical. So if we're living in this country, we're going to point to these problems and we're never going to shut up about them. Quite right, too. But we should ask ourselves why it is that so much of the rest of the world holds Britain in such high regard, which across the opinion polls that they do. And why, of course, the reason that we are, for the foreseeable future, going to be trying to manage down the number of people who want to come here. This is very different to the European situation, where they're going to be crying out for immigrants and not able to get enough in quite a lot of other countries.
Alex, your thoughts?
Oh, it's just it's sort of one concerning sentence after another. And I like Fraser Nelson, and I respect Fraser Nelson. He's an intelligent man. He's a good journalist. He's articulate. All the rest of it. He's always done a brilliant job in putting forward a lot of viewpoints that 10 years ago were not being made. But he just seems now to be in the outdated class. And this obsession with immigration, always good, always brilliant, a positive, a drum to beat, is just, you know, like I said, we need to actually address the hard truths that this isn't necessarily always the case, and saying that doesn't make you a racist, that we don't need to erode our own culture. We don't need to forsake our own heritage and our own identity at the altar of just being a sort of newly defined, I don't know, nothing. I mean, you know, you look at the statistics, for instance, in London, 60% of people in London now, living in London, were born abroad. And we're not talking about first generation, second generation. We're not even talking about skin color, okay? Let's make that very clear. We're just talking about people who were born abroad. And so when push comes to shove, if anything happened, and, you know, who's going to be defending London? Because most people who are born abroad are going to be on an aeroplane flying straight back home. If you're using somewhere as, you know, if you're a sort of rich Italian banker and you're using Britain as your international playground because of the City of London, you come and work hard here, play hard, you know, in our bars, and then every holiday you're back in Italy and eating in every Italian restaurant in London and not really mixing outside your community, then you also are not integrated. You know, it's so we have this sort of strange notion that the idea of having a monoculture is somehow bad, and the idea that we've gotten rid of the idea of having a monoculture is a positive, and that, oh, look, all these people are coming to Britain as a result of doing this. They're coming as economic units. And, you know, in the long term, they're making money to fill up their own pockets and go back home. They might be paying tax here, but, you know, they're not contributing to the heart of the land. And we're told that all these wonderful things that are, you know, all these different restaurants and festivals are all cultural enrichment. Yeah, me, like everybody else, loves going to wherever and enjoying the fact that we do have a really sort of interesting makeup of things in London to enjoy, most of the rest of the UK now. But it reaches a tipping point where you start losing your own stamp on your own country, that it's very hard to regain that. It's very hard to build that back.
Alex Phillips, you are absolutely brilliant. I could listen to you all day. That's What She Said is the Substack. I really, really recommend it. And thank you for being here today, Alex, as ever on Outspoken. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.